This video shows how you build a solar inverter system from scratch. This is a 2.9 kilowatt solar array with a 5 kilowatt inverter and a 14.7 kilowatt lithium battery system. And I'll be showing how the system was built bit by bit. So starting off, we installed the solar panels on the roof. For this part of the job, I got a company to install the solar panel. So even though this is a DIY job mostly, I did get help for some people to handle some part of the installation. For the solar install, we use standard rails, that's standard PV rails. This is really good because it ensures that your panels are secured, ensure for a neat installation. But most importantly, it ensures that the panel doesn't lie directly on your roof, and there's space between the panel and your roof, which ensures that installation is more efficient. As you can see how beautiful those panels are on the roof. So this part of the job, I'm setting up a combiner box. I got a breaker box, a 5-pole breaker box. I'm drilling holes for the cables here. So a breaker box is really important. A combiner box essentially is really important. Here I have two devices. I have a surge protection device and a DC breaker. The DC breaker's job is to protect from overcurrent. That's if there's overcurrent coming from the solar panel. It isolates the inverter from that current. And the surge protection also protects from things like lightning surges and all of that. So you need to pair them together. They work hand in hand together. I have a video where I also set up a combiner box, so you can watch that. I think that's a bit more detailed. So I'm putting them together in this breaker box and connecting the cable that will go to the inverter. So here I'm drilling a hole for the inverter. I'm adding fissure. This hole has already been precised off camera. So now I'm mounting the inverter on the hole to fit just perfectly. Next, we use a circular saw to drill the hole where the PV cable, that the solar panel cable, will be coming into through the ceiling. This circular saw just allows you to drill very neat, clean holes. This particular saw, the size matches the size of the flexible cable we're going to be using. So I'm using my drill the circular saw. You see how easy it is to drill with these things. Now I'm putting the solar cables, fitting them into the flexible pipe, and we run it through the hole that we've drilled, and everything kind of just fits like a glove. Next, we add clips to just hold the cable together. These clips were sized just for the cable. I bought most of these things. You can get most of these things in the electronic market. So this just allows for very clean install. You have very good cable management. And yeah, next I drill a hole. This is for the mccb. The mccb is a special kind of breaker that you use for high current application, like between batteries and inverter. You can see how big, massive this thing is. So I installed it. The mccb sits between the inverter and the battery. Again, protects the inverter from the battery, protect the battery from the inverter. So if there's a fault in the battery, it ensures that there is protection. So now I'm making a cable, the battery cables. I'm using 35 cable between the battery and the inverter. Now I'm just adding cable lugs to those cables. I'm using an hydraulic crimp to make sure that those cable lugs are tight and installed properly on the cables. Here I'm using heat shrink. I'm using my heat gun with heat shrink to kind of shrink the part where the lugs touch the cable. This protects the inner wires from things like moisture and make sure the installation, there's no exposed wire essentially. So now I'm connecting the battery to the mccb. As I was saying, mccb is really what you want to use. It's much bigger and more capable than the smaller mccb we use for the combiner box. They're ideal for high current application. Anything above 125 amps, you want to use an mccb. The good thing again is that mccb protects both ways. So if the bad current is coming from the inverter, it will protect the battery. If the bad current is coming from the battery, it also protects the inverter. So it works both ways, and it allows for a disconnect between the battery and the inverter. So I'm just connecting the battery to the inverter, but the battery is coming through the mccb. So I'm just connecting them to the battery terminals on the inverter. So yeah, this just ensures that you have a very safe system, and protect it from things like fire, which you really don't want in your installation. So even though this is a DIY system, try as much as possible to be as compliant as possible. So with that installed, next we install the breaker box. That's the combiner box that we set up earlier. Unfortunately, this space doesn't have ground, so we will not be installing ground. I think that will be happening later. We discovered that the property doesn't have ground, so we just decided that we're going to be connecting ground, but ideally you want to connect the SPD to ground. So having done that, we are putting a conduit. I like using this later, but before then, let's talk about this tool. See this tool? Really cool. It ensures that you drill without dust spreading everywhere, so it just allows for a very neat drilling. Now we're installing the conduit. I love the slitted conduit because they just make cable management very, very easy. That conduit is to bring in the AC wire. That's the wire that the inverter uses in powering the house. Next, we're installing the PV cable to the MCB. That's the breaker. We're installing the PV cable to the breaker. The cable has been installed properly. So here I'm just making sure that the connection is fine. Again, I use ferrules for this connection. I'm adding more clips just to make everything nice and sweet. Then I bring out my multimeter to check the connection from the PV, just to make sure that the PV has the right voltage. Next, we install a horizontal cable conduit. Again, we use the slitted conduit. So here we're just fitting that. This is where the PV cable will pass through, and also some of the AC cable will pass through here too. So it's just for cable management and just to keep things neat. So now I'm setting up the PV wire. I'm preparing it to connect to the inverter, because this inverter has a built-in charge controller. So that's what we're using. The PV is this inverter is a high voltage inverter. It's called the high voltage PV inverter because it can take high voltage from the PV. So in this case, we are sending that, I think, close to over 200 volts from the PV, because all the 5 PV are connected in series. We are using Jinko panels, 580 Jinko panels times 5. They're all connected in series. So now we're connecting those PV on the roof. We're now connecting it to the inverter. When I say PV, I mean solar panels. So yes, I use those words interchangeably. So if you hear me use the word PV, it's essentially just means solar panel. So I'm connecting the PV. Again, you can see I use ferrules for these wires for good connection. With that done, I turned on the battery and added this part. This part just ensures that there is good insulation between positive and negative wire on the mccb. With everything done, I do some final rounds of checks, mostly continuity, just make sure that things end up where they should be. After that, I turn on the inverter and then I turn on the PV. You want to do that in that sequence. Don't turn on the PV without turning on the battery. So I turn on the battery and the battery is already charging, 37 watts. So I connect to the BMS of the system, that's the battery, and I can see that 38 amps is going, and I confirm that with my multimeter, my amp meter. So this part is the electrician came in to do some work, and I added some blower to just blow out dust from the system. The electrician finalized the work. The inverter is up and running. The house is powered. I use a changeover switch and ATS, which is much better than the knife switch that a lot of people use. So this is the final installation. You can see all said and done, 3 days of work. The battery is full at this stage. Yeah, I hope you like it. You can rate my work and drop your comment what you think I should have done better. But this is how the final installation looked like. And yeah, so thanks for watching.